everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing another throwback video. These are older videos that I have just kind of stashed up during new releases. When you're on a design team, sometimes they can be a little bit crazy. You have a ton of cards you're making, and this is just one that I didn't put out, or else I would have been putting out like 3, sometimes 4 videos a day, which just isn't really, it's not good to do. So I am using Craft & Desert Diva's product. I did cut out 3 pieces of craft cardstock with the Crazy Stitched Frames die. Now this is one of their die sets that I'm using here. It is called the Garden Border die set. Now this is like a pile or a row border of dirt, and then it has these little cuts in it that have little places where you can put in these other vegetables and flowers that the die set also comes with. Now this doesn't completely fit across the card, so I just move it down and cut where it leaves off. Now that's okay for this design that I'm doing. It actually works out better because I'm gonna do like 3 different rows here. So I'm starting with the one that's gonna be the shortest row, and I'm just cutting on that piece of craft cardstock that I cut with the same die on 3 different craft cardstock pieces. So I have that first border that I'm doing there. This one didn't cut, so I'll just go ahead and use my scissors and snip where it kind of got hung up a little bit there. And there's that white piece of cardstock that I also cut with the largest rectangle from the Crazy Stitched Frames die. Now I did the same technique with those 3 different craft pieces, just going up a little bit each time, so each one is a little bit taller than the next. I also have a piece, or I have quite a bit of craft cardstock left over, so I'm going to go ahead and do some die cutting with that with my extra little pieces. I cut the sign 3 times for each one of the little rows, and then I'm going to cut this radish and the carrot. I'm cutting the radish from some very dark burgundy cardstock, the carrot from orange. I cut that several times, and then I'm going to cut them both from green, as well as the stem of the flower from green cardstock several times. I'm cutting the flower and the insert for that from some turquoise cardstock, and then there's these little, like, I call them beans. I don't know what they are. They're little leafy things. I'm cutting those from some lighter green cardstock than I cut with the flower stems, and I also used a different green for the carrot top and the radish top, just to give it a little bit of differentiation, because when you're using so much green it can get a little overwhelming if you use the same color. Now on those dirt borders, I'm going to go ahead and add some walnut stain distress ink. You could also use vintage photo if you wanted to. Any sort of brown ink would work for this. And I'm just adding a little bit of shading to the top of these. This is just going to give it a little bit more of a realistic, a little bit more dimension, and a little bit more depth. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this card. This one I actually didn't post because this was a card for my mother-in-law for Mother's Day. So think about that whenever you see this card. You can tailor it to your needs. It's just a die cut scene, which I love creating, and really I would love to make more of these cards and make like a little set. It is such a fun thing to do, and I love working with the tiny little die cuts. I know it's not everybody's thing, but I don't know, I love it, and I love creating these scenes with all these little elements to it. So I'm adding that little bit of shading to the top. I do make sure I come in with the sponge and go directly across the top, so you don't forget about that little border that you get whenever you die cut. You get that middle of the paper section. You want to cover up that with distress ink. Now for my white piece, I'm going to add some Salty Ocean to color up a sky here so it's not completely white. And I am just using a piece of paper on the bottom there to hold it in place and make sure that I've got my skyline there ready. You can see I put my largest border down, so I knew exactly where I needed it to end, and I'm going to kind of fade it from darkest towards the bottom of the sky, lightest towards the top. And then I can come in with another color to darken that up, and I'm going to be using some Mermaid Lagoon for this. You can use an even darker one if you wanted to and go really dark with that sky, give it some really nice dimension, but I just kept it a little bit more of a gradient look with some Mermaid Lagoon. I'm blending that out. I start with a very light hand, and then I go in darker. And now I'm going to switch back to that Salty Ocean and blend in the Mermaid Lagoon with the Salty Ocean, so it's a very nice gradient on that sky. Now it's time to put all these little die cuts together. I'm using glossy accents to put everything together. You can use multimedia matte, you can use one of those little quickie glue pens, you can use whatever glue you like to use. This is just my favorite. And you just want to make sure it's nice and strong because you've got so many little things going on here. You don't want them to start falling apart if you send your card through the mail. Now, one thing that really helps me when I put these little cards together is a very tiny pair of scissors because you're going to be doing some fine cutting. I use the same ones I use for fussy cutting, and also my little quick sticks tool. You see that off to the right hand side. I'm holding it now, but that helps me pick up those little tiny pieces. It has a little bit of a sticky end on it, so I can just pop that sticky end on whatever I need to pick up, and then I can place it down. It's got a bottom that pops off, and then you can just kind of use that as your fingers, so you're not getting glue smeared everywhere. It's a great tool if you love placing down sequins, if you do a lot of die cut scenes, like with these very tiny die cuts. This thing is a lifesaver. My fingers just would not do the job here. I'd have glue everywhere by the end of this project. Now, for each one of the little carrots and the radishes, they don't come with separate toppers. So what I did was I just cut them from green, and I cut them from burgundy and then some orange as well. And then I just cut the tops off from the green and placed them onto the colored cardstock. It gives them a little bit more dimension, so I like doing it this way. And it's just a great way to add that little bit of extra color. You could also, if you wanted to, if you don't have a ton of colored cardstock, you can die cut these all from white cardstock and color them in with different distressings. That's another way to go about doing your die cut scenes if you don't have a ton of colored cardstock to work with. Now for each one of my flowers, I'm going to go ahead and place in the centers. I die cut flowers from pink, very dark purple, and then some teal. I die cut all the centers from yellow to make it easier on myself, and then I'll go ahead and place each one of the center into those flowers. This die set still does come with 3 different flowers in it, so you get all those different options that you see here. Now I'm also going to go ahead and place the flower heads on top of the little bottoms, their little flower stems. And I just do that with a little bit more glossy accents. I'm cleaning up a little bit as I go along, just because with these tiny die cuts you're going to get some glue smushing out the sides. It's just going to happen. So just clean it up as you go along so you don't get it everywhere and your die cuts don't stick to whatever surface you're working with. So I've got a few more little flowers to go here, and then I'm going to start popping everything into their little dirt rows, and you'll see what I mean by those little slots that are cut into that dirt border. That really helps this makes it look like a real garden. I pop each one of these little things into those little holes that are cut by that garden border. It is just a little slit, and it has a little bit of stitching on it too that matches the Craft and Desert Divas dies. They have kind of a signature stitching going on all of their die cuts, but it matches all the stitching that you find on the other dies. But what I like to do is I put a dot of that glue right on the back where the bottom of the stitch, and then I pop in the die cut, and that way it's going to hold right in place. Once I get all these in, I'll go ahead and sit it down and add an acrylic block on top, or you can use something heavy, and that way everything's going to be nice and flat and dried and stuck. So even if you don't have glue on a certain carrot on the back, it's not going to fall out in the mail. Each one is glued securely in place. So on my very shortest border, I put down the radishes and carrots, and I did both of those on the same row, and I also put in the little sign that I made with the Craft and Brown cardstock. Then on my next tallest border, I'm going to go ahead and put in each one of those little bean pods, bean shoots. I don't know what they are, they're little leaves. And I'm going to put those in the next tallest border. Now this also comes with an even taller one that you can die cut, but I kept all the short ones for this actual card. Now finally on that third border, I'm inserting a sign on that one too, and then I'll come in and pop in the flowers. Again, I'm making sure I put a little dot of glue right on the back where I'm going to stick in those flowers, because that's going to hold everything in place. You're not going to be able to put enough glue on the back of this to hold everything in place, especially if you're putting it through the mail. You don't have to fill in every one of these little openings if you don't want to, but I really like this kind of crowded look on my card. So now comes the time of putting these all on that white panel that I put on the distress ink to make the sky. So I want to start off with my very back row, which is my tallest row, and I'm using double-sided adhesive, a very strong one, because as you add more die cuts, especially if you're using heavyweight cardstock, this gets pretty heavy, so you want to make sure you use a nice strong glue. I like the score tape, but you can use whatever strong glue you like. Just make sure it's a strong one. I can't really emphasize that enough. Then I went ahead and put down those little leaves. And then finally, I'm going to pop up this last one with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive, the carrots and the radishes. So it's got that little bit of extra dimension. And I just love the way that turned out. I love it. I want to make another card exactly like this again. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add a little sentiment in the top right-hand corner. And this says, "May your day bloom with happiness." That sentiment is from the Market Stand stamp set from Craft and Desert Divas. I'm stamping that in the top right hand corner, making sure I don't bump up against those stitching. I'm stamping that with some black dye ink just so it sits nicely on top of the distress ink. I am using my Mini Misty to do my stamping today, but you can do this with an acrylic block if you want to. Now with your Mini Misty and you're stamping in a card base like I am doing here, I do not have a panel on it yet. This is just a plain A2 side folding card base. I'm going to stamp on the inside, so I went ahead and opened it up, flipped around the back, so that way I can stamp on the inside, and I'm stamping "You're the best." This is from the Wishful Thoughts stamp set, and it's just a nice way to finish off the inside of this card. Now once I have it stamped down once, I'm going to go ahead and do a double stamp with this because that "your" is so it's a very large and bold stamp, so I like to give it a double stamping. Then when that's done, I can go ahead and flip the front over, so now it's closed and the inside of the card is all stamped. That's just a way to get more out of your Mini Misty. If you don't have the large one and you want to stamp on the inside of your cards, just do it before you have a panel on the front. Now with that panel, I went ahead and added some strong adhesive, quite a bit of it, to make sure this stays in place. And I'll go ahead and place it down on that A2 side folding card base that I stamped on the inside. Now the final little addition that I'm going to do to this panel is a little sun and a few little clouds. These are from the Scene Builders die set from Craft and Desert Divas. Now the clouds I cut from white cardstock, the sun from yellow cardstock. If you wanted to add a little bit more texture to this, you could always cut those clouds from white felt, and that would be just another little take it up a notch on this card. Now that is going to do it for this card today. Here's a final look at all those little pieces put together to make this scene. I love, love, love this card. As a matter of fact, my mother-in-law still has it on her shelf. She hasn't thrown it away. I'm not one that really cares if somebody pitches a card that I've made them. Once I give it to them, it's like you do what you want with that. But this one, I love seeing it on her shelf in her office every time I go in there. Here's a few final pictures as well. They are just, oh, I love this die set. But I'm going to leave links to all the supplies that I use down in the description box below if you want to check those out. That is going to do it for me today. Here's one final look at that card, at the dimension you get with all those die cuts. There are going to be a few links on the left side of your screen you can click on as always. Thank you guys for watching, and happy crafting.